Välkommen allesammen. Today, we're going to talk about some period blood. Yeah. So we often hear about this types of magic involving period blood, and we hear about it in different sources from different parts of the world, even in some movies. We see some examples of this. So, what is the story, and where does this come from? And this actual spell, we have a pretty good source from this and where it comes from. So there was a bishop who lived right around the year 1000. His name was Burchard of Worms. Now, Worms is a city in Germany, not far from Frankfurt. He lived around the year 1000 and he published a series of books. So book number 19 is the one we're going to be looking at. And this book, it seems to be a collection of stories from other priests who took confessions from the people, from the general population around that. Catholic priests, they go in the church and they sit in a booth, and then the people come in and they talk, they say all their confessions about all their sins and ask for forgiveness. So this book is basically a bunch of the stories that Burchard, Bishop Burchard, heard from all these priests, and he wrote it down in a book. So much for privacy during your confession, huh? So anyway, these stories were. I'll just read a couple of them to you. There's first one, and the way they spoke, it's you'll see. It's they're describing as in disgust. As, do you know what some women are doing these days? Like they're stories that the other priests have told Bishop Burchard. It's like, can you believe what these women are doing these days? My God. So here's the first one. Do you know what certain women are in the habit of doing? They take their menstrual blood and mix it into food or drink and give it to their husbands to eat or drink, so they will have more lusted after by them. If you have done that, and that's followed by a church line, a Christian penance or something like that. So that's the first one. So blood was believed to be the soul substance. So if two people mixed their blood or ingested one another's blood, they were going to be connected somehow. And the part of the body, wherever the blood came from, was linked to the kind of energy that it would bring. So period comes from the vagina, of course. So that's connected with sex and love. So the women would do this to make their husbands fall in love with them, or it didn't even have to be a husband. I guess if you wanted to bake some bread for some neighbor across the street, or the king of the city, whatever you want to do, that's what they did. So that was the first one. Another one from the same book, book 19. Do you know what certain women are in the habit of doing? They lie face down, expose their hindquarters, and have bread prepared on top of their naked bottom, which, when baked, is given to their husbands to eat. They do this so that their husbands fall more adherently in love with them. And so that's the same thing. If you have done this and it's followed by some church penance, like that. It's the same thing. If you eat something that has come into contact with with a naked person's body, it was believed that you would be connected to them. So the idea is that the man ate something that was made on the woman's ass or vagina, and then they would feast on that. So they would want to feast on her later on in life. This one would be more for women who just wanted to get a bit more sex from their husbands, really. And that's about it. They would do that, and that would be the spell. The husbands were supposedly gonna be more lustful towards them. So that's a cool spell, whatever. But what does this tell us about the origin? This is what I'm interested in. So it was from about the year 1000 when this book was written. A little bit before that, probably, not sure exactly, but it was around the year 1000 that Burchard of Worms lived. What does it say? Women who confessed these things to the priests came into the church and confessed to the priest and asked for forgiveness to their sins. So what does that say? Well, it says that they were still Christian. The women that were doing these things were still Christian. And they maybe felt guilty about it, or they felt the need that they needed to confess, but they still did it anyway. They still continued their pagan traditions, even though it was strictly forbidden from the church. It doesn't seem like this was very a forbidden practice. It was not punishable by death or anything. It doesn't seem you wouldn't get hanged from the stake. No, hanged from the noose, burned at the stake. That's what I was looking for. So it doesn't seem like this was that forbidden that it would have a punishment like that. But it was definitely forbidden. It was definitely looked at as a sin, and that was about it. So think about the time frame here. Germany was not 100% fully officially Christianized until about the 800s sometime. I forget the exact date. Some parts of Germany a lot earlier. So some parts a lot closer to the Roman Empire. They would have been Christianized around the 400s, maybe even 300s in some places. But Germany was not officially Christianized until a lot later, closer to this time. So this text would have been written probably less than 200 years after Germany was completely Christianized. So that shows that at least the pagan traditions carried on a little bit until that time, and we see it a lot more too. We see it, like I said, examples of this all throughout history. We see it a lot more since then, even up to just a couple hundred years ago in the colonies here, I believe. In America, the women were still doing these things, and we have records of that. But this is just the very first record of magic like that. And yeah, so chances are, of course, that this continued way back in the pagan times, even though it was written by a Christian. So that's about it for this video. On to the next one. See ya.